It all seemed like just a simple delay until wolves blocked the train in the middle of a snowstorm. But what they wanted changed everything. A secret buried deep in the forest, lives at risk, and an impossible choice. Get ready for a story that will give you chills, and subscribe now so you don't miss a thing. The heavy sky promised a violent snowstorm as the old freight train slowly wound its way along the isolated tracks of the Alaskan boreal forest. Ethan Mercer had been driving this route for 15 years, and he knew every curve, every landmark, and most importantly, every sign of danger. Today, something felt different. The air was heavier, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the approaching storm. Without any warning, Ethan was forced to brake abruptly. A pack of wolves blocked the railway, their eyes fixed on the locomotive with an expression that mixed alertness and supplication. At first, he thought it was just the typical behavior of wild animals, but there was something strange in their attitude. They didn't attack, they didn't run away, they just stood firm, as if trying to convey a silent message. "What the hell?" Ethan muttered, reaching for the radio. "Control, this is train 427. I've got a situation here." The radio crackled. "Go ahead, 427. There's a pack of wolves on the tracks. They're not moving. Use the horn, Mercer. They'll scatter." Ethan frowned. "I don't think so. There's something different about them." "Different how?" The voice on the other end belonged to Stanley Walker, Ethan's supervisor and a man known for his impatience with delays. "They're just standing there, looking at me, almost like they want something." "Wolves don't want anything from humans except to be left alone," Stanley barked. "Clear the tracks and get moving. We're already behind schedule." Ethan sighed and put down the radio. He tried the horn, a long, sharp blast that echoed through the forest. The wolves didn't budge. Instead, one of them, a large silver female with intelligent eyes, stepped forward, then looked pointedly to the side of the tracks. Curious and apprehensive, Ethan decided to investigate. He grabbed his heavy coat, a flashlight, and his satellite. Phone, cell service was non-existent this far north, and stepped out into the biting cold. The fine snow that had begun to fall revealed a scene that left him in shock. Behind a damaged cargo box, a group of wolf pups trembled, vulnerable to the cutting cold. Even more surprising was what he found inside the box. Besides the pups, there were packages of rare medicinal plants destined for an ecological project in a distant environmental reserve. The cargo had detached from the moving train minutes before. "Oh my God," Ethan whispered, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The pups whimpered, huddling together for warmth. The adult wolves kept their distance, watching him intently. The silver female, clearly the alpha, maintained eye contact, her gaze seeming to plead with him. Ethan reached for his satellite phone to call for help when he heard the rumble of approaching snowmobiles. His heart sank. Stanley must have sent security personnel to clear the tracks. In this part of Alaska, that usually meant men with little patience and plenty of firepower. Within minutes, 3 snowmobiles pulled up beside the train. The men dismounted, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their leader, a burly man named Mason Reed, approached Ethan with a scowl. "What's the hold-up, Mercer?" Mason demanded. "Walker says you're being held up by some mutts." Ethan stepped between Mason and the wolves. "It's not what you think. There's cargo that fell off the train, valuable cargo, and there are pups here. They're just protecting their young." Mason snorted. "Not my problem. My orders are to clear the tracks." "Just give me a minute," Ethan pleaded. "There's something else going on here." As he spoke, a woman emerged from one of the passenger cars of the train. Dr. Sarah Winters, a respected environmental scientist who had boarded at the last station, approached with purposeful strides, her red hair visible beneath her wool hat. "What's happening?" she asked, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. The wolves, the pups, the damaged cargo box. Ethan quickly explained the situation. Sarah's face lit up with understanding. Those plants, they're part of the Boreal Restoration Project. I'm on my way there now. She turned to examine the cargo, then gasped, "This is even more valuable than you realize. These seedlings contain a compound that could revolutionize treatment for several autoimmune diseases. They're irreplaceable." Mason shifted impatiently. "Lady, we've got orders." "And I've got documentation," Sarah interrupted, pulling out her tablet. "This entire area is a provisional preservation zone. By law, no wildlife can be disturbed here without proper authorization from the Environmental Protection Agency." The tension increased with the arrival of the armed men sent by the railway supervision, who, without time for subtleties, had received orders to disperse the wolves and clear the tracks at any cost. Ethan felt a knot in his stomach. He knew that if he obeyed, he would not only put the defenseless pups at risk, but also an entire ecosystem. The situation worsened when, during an attempt to disperse the wolves, the snow gave way on a nearby slope, revealing an improvised shelter where other injured animals were trying to survive. The surrounding forest, recently devastated by illegal logging, had forced those creatures to take refuge there. Sarah gasped, "This is worse than I thought. This must be one of the last intact animal communities in this region. The logging has pushed them into this small pocket of forest." Mason looked uncomfortable, but stood his ground. "My orders? Your orders could result in an environmental disaster," Sarah snapped, "and a PR nightmare for your company when I report this." The radio on Mason's belt crackled. "Read, what's the status?" Stanley's impatient voice demanded. Mason hesitated, looking from the wolves to Sarah to Ethan. "We've got a complication, sir." "I don't want to hear about complications. I want to hear that the tracks are clear and that train is moving." Ethan, feeling the weight of responsibility, quickly devised a plan. Use part of the still intact cargo from the train to improvise a barrier and protect the animals until help arrived. "Listen," he said to Mason, "we can set up a temporary shelter using the empty containers from Car 7. They'll shield the animals from the storm until proper wildlife services can get here." Mason shook his head. "Walker will never go for it." "Then don't tell him," Ethan said. "Tell him you need another hour to clear some debris safely." One of Mason's men, a younger guy named Jake, spoke up. "He's right, Mason. Look at them. They're just trying to survive." The radio crackled again. "Reed, do you copy? I want that train moving in 15 minutes or heads will roll." Mason grimaced. "Yes, sir, working on it now." He turned to Ethan. "And Sarah?" 15 minutes. That's all I can give you." Ethan and Sarah exchanged glances. It wasn't enough time to set up proper shelter or to get wildlife services there. They needed hours, not minutes. "We need more time," Sarah insisted. "You don't have it," Mason replied, his expression torn between duty and compassion. Sarah turned to Ethan, her eyes blazing with determination. "Then we'll have to make time." Ethan knew what he had to do. In a split-second decision that would change the course of his life, he reached into his pocket, pulled out the master key to the locomotive, and threw it as far as he could into the deepening snow. "What the hell did you just do?" Mason demanded, his face reddening. Ethan stood tall, his resolve hardening like the ice forming on the tracks. "I just bought us the time we need." The silence that followed Ethan's action was deafening, broken only by the howling wind that seemed to underscore the gravity of what he had just done. Mason's face contorted with disbelief and anger. "Are you out of your mind, Mercer? You could lose your job over this." Ethan's calm demeanor belied the storm of emotions within him. "Some things are more important than a job, Mason." Sarah stepped forward, her expression a mixture of gratitude and concern. "He's right. What's happening here is bigger than all of us." She pulled out her satellite phone. "I'm calling my contacts at the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. They can dispatch an emergency team." Mason ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with his next move. Walker is going to have my head for this. Blame me, Ethan said. Tell him I went rogue. It's the truth anyway. Jake, the younger security officer, had been observing the wolves with a mix of caution and fascination. Mason, look at them. They're not acting like normal wolves. It's almost like they understand what's happening. The alpha female had indeed been watching the human drama unfold with an intensity that seemed almost sentient. Now, as if sensing a shift in their favor, she moved slightly closer to Ethan, maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly communicating something with her steady gaze. I've studied wolf behavior for years, Sarah said softly, and I've never seen anything quite like this. They're displaying a level of trust that's extremely rare, especially with humans they don't know. A crackling from Mason's radio interrupted the moment. Reed, what's the status? Why isn't that train moving? Stanley's voice had risen to a near shout. Mason hesitated, then raised the radio to his lips. Sir, we've encountered a situation. The train's master key has been lost in the snow. We're searching for it now. What? How does something like that happen? Who's responsible for this incompetence? Mason glanced at Ethan. We're investigating, sir, but we're also dealing with a complex wildlife situation here. Dr. Sarah Winters from the Environmental Protection Agency is on site, and she's identified this area as a provisional preservation zone. The radio went silent for a long moment. When Stanley's voice returned, it was cold and calculated. Put her on. Sarah took the radio. This is Dr. Winters. I'm with the Boreal Restoration Project, and I have documentation confirming that this area falls under the Endangered Ecosystem Protection Act of 2023. Any disruption to the wildlife here without proper protocols could result in serious legal consequences for your company. I don't care if you're with the president himself, Stanley spat. That train needs to move. We have schedules to keep, contracts to fulfill, and laws to follow, Sarah countered firmly. I've already alerted my colleagues. A wildlife response team is on its way, along with representatives from the EPA. I strongly advise cooperating fully. Another long pause. Reed? Mason took back the radio. Yes, sir? You have 1 hour to resolve this. 1 hour. After that, I'm sending in a helicopter with a backup key and a security team that knows how to follow orders. Understood? Understood, sir, Mason replied, his expression grim as he lowered the radio. Jake had been helping Ethan examine the cargo box and the pups. They're in rough shape, he reported. The cold's getting to them. And there's something else. Ethan followed Jake's gaze to where the snow had given way, revealing the makeshift animal shelter. More than just a few injured creatures, it appeared to be a veritable sanctuary. Besides several adult wolves, there were foxes, a young moose with what looked like a healing leg injury, and even a lynx, all coexisting in an arrangement that defied natural predator-prey relationships. This is extraordinary, Sarah breathed, carefully approaching the site. It's like a natural refugee camp. These animals should be competing or avoiding each other, not living together like this. The situation grew more complicated as they investigated further. Beneath the surface, the shelter extended into what appeared to be an abandoned mining tunnel, reinforced by fallen trees and branches. Inside, they found more plants similar to those in the cargo box, growing in small, carefully maintained patches. These are the same medicinal species, Sarah confirmed, examining the plants with wonder. But they shouldn't be able to grow here naturally. Someone's been cultivating them. The wolves? Jake asked incredulously. Sarah shook her head. No, but... She trailed off, her eyes widening as she spotted something deeper in the tunnel. A small cabin was built into the rock face, weathered but clearly maintained. As they approached cautiously, the door opened, revealing an elderly Native Alaskan Man with deep-set eyes and a face lined with the wisdom of decades. I wondered when someone would finally notice, he said in a voice as rough as the bark of the ancient spruce trees surrounding them. Who are you? Ethan asked. My name is Joseph Raincloud. I was the caretaker of these lands before your companies came with their machines and papers claiming ownership. He gestured to the animals around them. They were here first. I'm just helping them survive what your kind has done to their home. Joseph explained that he had been working to preserve the medicinal plants native to the region for years, recognizing their value long before pharmaceutical companies became interested. When illegal logging operations destroyed much of the natural habitat, he created this sanctuary and began teaching the animals, particularly the wolves with whom he had formed a special bond, to help him protect and transport the plants. The wolves brought the cargo box here? Mason asked, skepticism evident in his voice. Joseph nodded. They recognized the scent of the plants. They know their importance not just to humans, but to the forest itself. These plants are critical to the ecosystem's ability to recover from the damage it has sustained. Sarah's satellite phone rang. The wildlife response team was 20 minutes out. Mason checked his watch. That still leaves 40 minutes before Walker's backup team arrives. We need a plan. Ethan had been thinking, what if we don't just protect the animals and plants here? What if we expose what's been happening with the illegal logging? I have documentation, Joseph offered. Records, photographs, even samples of soil contamination from their equipment. I've been collecting evidence for years, but no one would listen. Sarah's eyes lit up. With my credentials and your evidence, we could force an immediate investigation. The entire area would be placed under protection during the review process. Walker won't go down without a fight, Mason warned. Clearwater Railway has a lot of powerful friends. So do I, Sarah countered, and more importantly, so does the truth. As they strategized, the alpha female wolf approached Joseph, nuzzling his hand affectionately before turning her intelligent gaze to Ethan. The connection was palpable, a silent understanding between species that transcended words. She trusts you, Joseph said to Ethan. That's rare. She sees something in you that most humans have lost, a connection to the natural world, a willingness to listen. The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of helicopter blades. Mason checked his watch and frowned. That can't be right. Walker's team shouldn't be here for another 30 minutes. Joseph's expression darkened. It's not your railway people, it's the loggers. They come every few days to check their equipment. If they see us here, Sarah began, they'll know their operation has been discovered, Joseph finished, and they won't be happy about it. The helicopter grew louder, descending toward a clearing about half a mile away. Time was running out. We need to hide the animals and secure the evidence, Ethan said decisively. Mason, can your men help move the pups deeper into the tunnel? Mason hesitated only briefly before nodding. Jake, Tim, help them out. I'll keep watch for the loggers. As they worked quickly to move the most vulnerable animals to safety, Sarah downloaded Joseph's digital evidence onto her tablet and secured the physical samples in her waterproof research case. The alpha female and her pack helped guide the other animals deeper into the sanctuary, displaying an almost unbelievable level of coordination and purpose. I've never seen anything like this, Sarah whispered to Ethan as they worked. It's as if they understand exactly what's at stake. Maybe they do, Ethan replied. Maybe we're the ones who've been missing something all along. The sound of engines, not just the helicopter, but all-terrain vehicles as well, grew closer. Mason returned from his lookout position, his expression grim. They're coming this way, 4 ATVs, at least 6 men, armed. Joseph nodded calmly. They always are. But today they'll find something they don't expect. Ethan looked at the old man curiously. What's that? A small, knowing smile crossed Joseph's weathered face. Us. The crunch of boots on snow and the rumble of ATV engines grew louder as the logging team approached. Ethan, Sarah, Mason, and Joseph crouched behind the large cargo box, watching as 6 men in heavy winter gear, rifles slung over their shoulders, emerged from the tree line. Their leader, a tall man with a scar running along his jaw, surveyed the scene with suspicious eyes. "That's Victor Blackwood," Joseph whispered. "He runs the logging operation for Northwest Timber. He's the one who ordered the clear-cutting beyond the legal boundaries." "What's a freight train doing stopped here?" Victor called out to his men. "Check it out and keep your eyes open." Mason turned to Ethan. "We need to stall them until the wildlife team arrives." Ethan nodded. "I'll handle this. Sarah, get that evidence ready to transmit as soon as your team arrives." Before anyone could stop him, Ethan stood and stepped into view, raising his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "Hello there, Ethan Mercer, Clearwater Railway. We've had a bit of a situation here." Victor's hand moved instinctively towards his weapon. "What kind of situation?" "Mechanical trouble," Ethan lied smoothly. "Something wrong with the braking system. We're waiting for a repair team." Victor's eyes narrowed. "In the middle of nowhere, with wolves around." He gestured to where a few of the adult wolves could still be seen at the edge of the forest. "Yeah, they showed up after we stopped." "Curious, I guess," Ethan said with a shrug. "We've kept our distance." One of Victor's men approached him and whispered something. Victor's expression darkened. "My man here says there are fresh tracks all around this area. Too many for just a train crew." Ethan maintained his calm demeanor, but inside his heart was racing. "We had to check the tracks for damage. Standard procedure." Victor took a step forward. "I know every operation in this area, Mercer, and I know that Clearwater doesn't run unscheduled stops out here unless something's up." His gaze drifted to the damaged cargo box. "What's in there?" "Just some agricultural supplies," Ethan replied. "Nothing valuable." Victor moved toward the box, his men spreading out behind him. "I think I'll have a look for myself." From there, "Hiding place," Mason whispered urgently to Sarah. "We can't let them find Joseph or the evidence." Sarah nodded, her fingers flying over her satellite phone. "The wildlife team is 10 minutes out. We just need to buy time." Joseph's calm voice surprised them. "The wolves will help us." As if on cue, a chorus of howls erupted from different directions in the forest, startling Victor and his men. The sound was eerie, almost orchestrated, creating the impression of a much larger pack surrounding them. "What the hell?" one of Victor's men exclaimed, raising his rifle. Victor held up a hand. "Hold steady, they're just wolves." The alpha female emerged from the tree line, her silver coat gleaming in the fading light. She stood her ground, eyes fixed on Victor, neither advancing nor retreating. One by one, other wolves appeared at the edges of the clearing, creating a perimeter around the humans. "This isn't normal behavior," another of Victor's men said nervously. "I've never seen wolves act like this." Victor scowled. "Something's spooking them." He turned to Ethan. "What aren't you telling me, Mercer?" Before Ethan could respond, Sarah stepped out from behind the cargo box, her EPA credentials displayed prominently. "Dr. Sarah Winters, Environmental Protection Agency. I think I can answer that question." Victor's expression flickered between surprise and anger. The EPA has no jurisdiction over private logging operations. It does when those operations extend into protected lands, Sarah countered, approaching confidently, and when they threaten endangered species and ecosystems. Mason and Jake emerged as well, flanking Sarah and Ethan. Joseph remained hidden with the evidence and the most vulnerable animals. Victor's laugh was cold. "Protected lands? This area is designated for commercial use. I have the permits to prove it." "Your permits cover this area," Sarah agreed, displaying a map on her tablet. "But your operation has extended well beyond those boundaries. We have satellite imagery showing illegal clear-cutting in protected zones. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Victor's face. Those images could be from anywhere. "They're geotagged and time-stamped," Sarah replied, "and they're just the beginning of our evidence." The standoff was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching vehicles, the wildlife response team arriving ahead of schedule. Victor seemed to make a quick calculation. "This isn't over. Northwest Timber has operated in Alaska for 50 years. We won't be run off by some environmental crusader and a train conductor with a hero complex." As he turned to leave, the alpha female wolf moved, positioning herself between Victor and his ATVs. The other wolves followed suit, effectively cutting off their escape route. "Call off your mutts," Victor growled at Joseph, who had finally emerged from hiding. Joseph's expression remained impassive. "They're not mine to command." The wildlife response team arrived in force, 3 heavy-duty vehicles bearing the logos of the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center and the EPA. Leading them was Dr. Michael Reynolds, a renowned conservationist and Sarah's colleague. "Sarah," he called out, hurrying toward them, "we got your message. Is that—" He stopped short, staring in amazement at the scene before him. The wolves holding their position, the loggers frozen in uncertainty, the damaged cargo box with precious medicinal plants. "Mike, this is more significant than we thought," Sarah said quickly. "We've uncovered an illegal logging operation threatening a unique ecosystem, and there's something else." She gestured to Joseph. "This is Joseph Raincloud. He's been protecting these lands and these plants for years." Dr. Reynolds looked from Joseph to the wolves with growing wonder. "The Raincloud Sanctuary. We thought it was just a legend. Stories about a man who could communicate with wolves, who cultivated healing plants that shouldn't be able to grow this far north." Joseph nodded slightly. "Not a legend, just an old man trying to preserve what matters." The arrival of the conservation team shifted the power dynamics dramatically. Victor and his men found themselves outnumbered and, more importantly, caught in a legally precarious position. "Mr. Blackwood," Dr. Reynolds addressed Victor formally, "your company is now under investigation for multiple environmental violations. I suggest you cooperate fully." Victor's face flushed with anger, but he recognized the futility of resistance. "This isn't the end of this." "No," Sarah agreed. "It's just the beginning of accountability." As the conservation team secured the area and began documenting the evidence, another issue loomed. Stanley Walker would soon be sending his team with the replacement key for the train. Ethan approached Mason, who had been unusually quiet. "Walker's team will be here any minute. Where do you stand?" Mason looked at the wolves, the plants, the fragile ecosystem they had discovered, and then back at Ethan. 15 years with Clearwater Railway, and I've never questioned an order. But this," he gestured around them, "this is different." The radio on Mason's belt crackled to life. "Read, this is Walker. The helicopter is 5 minutes out. Status report." Mason took a deep breath and raised the radio. "Sir, the situation has evolved. We have EPA and wildlife conservation personnel on site. They've declared this area a protected zone and are conducting an active investigation." "What investigation? What are you talking about?" Stanley's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Illegal logging, sir. Environmental violations. The EPA has ordered all operations in the area suspended pending review. That includes train movements." A moment of stunned silence, then, "Put Mercer on." Mason handed the radio to Ethan, who took it with steady hands. "This is Mercer." "You're finished at Clearwater," Stanley said, his voice cold with fury. "Do you understand that? Your career is over." Ethan looked at the alpha female wolf, who watched him with those intelligent eyes, and at Joseph, who nodded in silent support. "I understand that some things are more important than a job, Mr. Walker. The helicopter can land, but this train isn't moving until the EPA gives clearance." He handed the radio back to Mason as Stanley's angry tirade continued. The decision had been made. Whatever came next, Ethan knew he had done the right thing. The helicopter appeared on the horizon, a small black dot growing larger against the snow-laden clouds. As it approached, the wolves retreated to the forest edge. But they didn't leave. They watched, waited, their presence a reminder of what was at stake. "What happens now?" Ethan asked Sarah as they watched the helicopter begin its descent. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the determination that had driven her work for years. Now we protect what matters. We make them listen. We make them see." The alpha female wolf howled, a sound both mournful and defiant. One by one, the others joined in, their voices rising in a chorus that seemed to echo Sarah's sentiment. In that moment, standing between worlds, human civilization and wild nature, corporate interests and environmental preservation, Ethan felt something shift within him. A reconnection, just as Joseph had described, to something essential that had been lost. The helicopter touched down, whipping snow into miniature cyclones. As the door opened and Stanley Walker emerged, face set in grim lines of corporate authority, Ethan stood tall. Whatever challenge came next, he was ready to face it. The heavy sky had lightened somewhat as Stanley Walker's boots crunched on the fresh snow. He marched toward Ethan with determined strides, his face a mask of corporate fury. Behind him, two security officers in Clearwater Railway uniforms flanked a technician carrying a case that presumably contained the replacement master key. The helicopter's blades slowed to a stop, the sudden silence emphasizing the tension in the clearing. "Mercer!" Stanley shouted, his voice carrying across the open space. "You have exactly 30 seconds to explain yourself before I have you arrested for sabotage and theft of company property." Ethan stood his ground, unflinching. The past few hours had fundamentally shifted something within him. The man who had dutifully followed company protocol for 15 years was gone, replaced by someone who recognized that some things transcended corporate interests. "I think Dr. Winters and the EPA team can explain better than I can." "Sir," he replied calmly. Stanley barely glanced at Sarah, his focus entirely on the perceived insubordination of his employee. "I don't care about some environmental crusade. I care about getting that train moving and fulfilling our contractual obligations." Sarah stepped forward, her credentials still displayed prominently. The wind had picked up, blowing strands of her red hair across her face, but her expression remained resolute. "Mr. Walker, I'm Dr. Sarah Winters with the Environmental Protection Agency. This area has been designated for emergency protection. Under the Endangered Ecosystem Protection Act, all industrial activities, including railway operations, are suspended pending a full investigation." "This is a commercial railway with federal clearance," Stanley retorted, his voice sharp with dismissal. "No last-minute designation can override that." Dr. Reynolds joined the conversation, his own credentials in hand. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Stanley's evident agitation. "Actually, Mr. Walker, it can, especially when we have evidence of criminal environmental violations directly connected to the cargo on your train." Stanley's expression shifted slightly. A businessman first and foremost, he recognized the potential legal complications. "What are you talking about?" "The medicinal plants in that damaged cargo box," Sarah explained, pointing to the container where the wolf pups had been found. "They're part of a shipment that was collected illegally from this protected region. According to our preliminary analysis, they match exactly with the endangered species being cultivated here by Mr. Raincloud." Joseph stepped forward, his weathered face solemn in the fading light. Despite his advanced age, he stood tall, a man who had spent decades in harmony with these forests. "These plants have been stolen from these lands for years. The wolves recognized their scent and brought the container here, trying to return what was taken." Stanley scoffed, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. "You expect me to believe that wolves recognized some plants and deliberately derailed part of my train? That's absurd." "Perhaps," Dr. Reynolds acknowledged with a slight nod, "but what isn't absurd is the satellite imagery and soil samples proving that Northwest Timber has been illegal logging in protected areas, and that someone has been transporting the harvested medicinal plants via your railway." For the first time, genuine uncertainty flickered across Stanley's face. His gaze darted to the wolves at the edge of the clearing, then back to the officials confronting him. "Clearwater Railway merely transports cargo. We're not responsible for verifying the legality of every item." "Actually," Sarah countered, swiping through documents on her tablet before holding it up for Stanley to see, "under the revised Transportation of Endangered Flora Act of 2022 you are, especially when your company has been notified previously about suspicious shipments which..." She displayed a series of emails on the screen. "You were, Mr. Walker, 3 times in the past year alone." Stanley's face paled slightly as he recognized the correspondence. His jaw tightened, a muscle working in his cheek. Those notifications were inconclusive. They required further investigation before action could be taken. "An investigation you never initiated," Dr. Reynolds pointed out, "which makes Clearwater potentially complicit in environmental crimes." The legal implications were clearly sinking in for Stanley. His security officers exchanged uneasy glances, their hands moving away from their weapons. One of them, a veteran officer named Harris, stepped closer to his boss. "Sir," he said quietly, but audibly in the tense silence, "we might want to consider our options here." Victor Blackwood, who had been held with his logging crew by the wildlife team, called out from where he stood under guard. "Don't let them bluff you, Walker. They've got nothing but circumstantial evidence and the word of an old man who talks to wolves." "We have rather more than that," Sarah replied calmly, holding up her tablet once more. "Thanks to Mr. Raincloud's meticulous documentation over the years, we have transaction records linking Northwest Timber to illegal harvesting operations, and those operations to shipments on Clearwater trains. Specifically trains authorized by you, Mr. Walker." Stanley's composure cracked further. What had started as a routine delay was rapidly evolving into a potential legal and public relations nightmare. "I authorized thousands of shipments. I can't be expected to personally verify each one." "No," Sarah agreed, her tone reasonable, "but you can be expected to follow up on official EPA warnings. And you can certainly be expected not to override those warnings when they conflict with profitable shipping contracts." The alpha female wolf emerged from the forest edge, moving with deliberate grace toward the gathered humans. The security officers reached for their weapons instinctively, but Mason held up a hand. "Don't," he warned, his voice authoritative. "She's not a threat." The wolf stopped a respectful distance away, her intelligent eyes moving from Joseph to Ethan to Stanley, as if assessing each man in turn. Her silver coat caught the fading light, giving her an almost mythical appearance. "Remarkable," Dr. Reynolds breathed, genuine awe in his voice. "I've studied wolf behavior for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this level of trust and interaction." Joseph nodded, a slight smile crossing his weathered features. "She understands more than most humans give her credit for." "They all do." The wolf turned her gaze to the helicopter, then back to Stanley, her posture alert but not aggressive. Several other wolves had positioned themselves at the edge of the trees, watching the proceedings with unnervingly focused attention. Stanley shook his head in disbelief. "This is insane. I'm standing in the middle of nowhere arguing with environmentalists while wolves stare at me and my freight sits idle." "Sir," one of the security officers spoke up hesitantly, removing his cap, "maybe we should consider cooperating with the EPA investigation. If there's any legitimacy to these accusations..." "Legitimacy?" Stanley interrupted, though with less conviction than before. "It's a stalling tactic, nothing more." Sarah's satellite phone chimed with an incoming message. She checked it and smiled, a smile of vindication and relief. That would be the formal protection order from the regional EPA director, along with a cease and desist for both Northwest Timber and Clearwater Railway operations in this area. She showed the screen to Stanley. Electronic signature and all, legally binding as of right now. Stanley's shoulders sagged slightly. The fight wasn't completely gone from him, but reality was setting in. He ran a hand through his hair, calculation replacing anger in his expression. How long will this investigation take? We have contracts to fulfill, schedules to maintain. That depends on your level of cooperation, Dr. Reynolds replied, his tone professional but not unsympathetic. If Clearwater provides full access to shipping records related to Northwest Timber, it could expedite matters considerably. Ethan, who had been watching this exchange silently, finally spoke. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of conviction. Mr. Walker, I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, but this is bigger than schedules and contracts. This is about doing the right thing. Stanley turned to Ethan, his expression a mix of anger and resignation. The right thing might cost me my job too, Mercer. Maybe, Ethan acknowledged with a slight nod. Or maybe it's an opportunity for Clearwater to be on the right side of history, to be part of the solution instead of the problem. A commotion from the wildlife team drew their attention. One of the researchers, a young woman named Dr. Eliza Chen, was hurrying toward them, excitement evident in her movements. She clutched a tablet in her gloved hands, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. Dr. Reynolds, you need to see this, she called out, her voice carrying across the clearing. We've completed the preliminary analysis of those plant samples. The molecular structure is unlike anything we've documented before. These aren't just rare medicinal plants, they're completely unique to this ecosystem. Dr. Reynolds took the tablet, his eyes widening as he scrolled through the data. This is extraordinary. The adaptive properties alone could revolutionize our understanding of boreal forest ecology. Sarah looked over his shoulder, her expression one of awe as she studied the complex molecular diagrams. The therapeutic applications. These compounds could lead to breakthroughs in treating autoimmune disorders that we've been struggling with for decades. Dr. Chen nodded eagerly. The preliminary binding assays suggest unprecedented specificity for inflammatory pathways associated with conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. And they're achieving this without the side effects we typically see with synthetic compounds. That's what I've been trying to tell people for years, Joseph said quietly, his eyes reflecting decades of accumulated wisdom. These plants aren't just valuable as commodities, they're essential to this ecosystem and potentially to human medicine as well. Stanley watched this exchange, his businessman's mind clearly calculating the implications. The anger had faded, from his expression replaced by a look of cautious interest. If these plants are as valuable as you say, then protecting them makes financial sense too. Sustainable harvesting would be more profitable in the long run than clear-cutting. Joseph nodded, adjusting the worn woolen scarf around his neck. I've been developing sustainable harvesting methods for years, taking only what can regrow when it can be safely harvested without damaging the plant's ability to reproduce. And the wolves help you? Mason asked, still struggling to comprehend the extraordinary relationship between the old man and the wild animals. They protect the areas where the plants grow, Joseph explained, gesturing toward the alpha female who had remained close by. They've learned which ones are important, which ones need to be left alone. Over time, they began to understand that their fate and the fate of these plants are intertwined. The alpha female, as if understanding she was being discussed, moved closer to Joseph, standing beside him with quiet dignity. Her pack remained at the edge of the clearing, alert but no longer tense. It's a symbiotic relationship, Sarah observed, her scientific mind cataloguing the remarkable behavior. The wolves protect the plants. The plants help maintain the ecosystem that sustains the wolves. And Joseph is the bridge between them, Ethan added, watching the old man with newfound respect. Dr. Chen approached the alpha female cautiously, her scientific curiosity evident. The level of socialization these wolves display toward humans is unprecedented in wild populations. Have you ever attempted to document this phenomenon, Mr. Raincloud? Joseph shook his head. Some things aren't meant to be studied in laboratories or written about in journals. They're meant to be experienced, understood with the heart as much as the mind. Victor, still held by the wildlife team but within earshot, laughed bitterly. So you're all going to take the word of a crazy old man who thinks he talks to wolves? Northwest Timber has legal rights to harvest in this region. Rights that don't extend to protected lands, Dr. Reynolds countered firmly, and certainly not to endangered species. Stanley, surprisingly, turned on Victor. His business pragmatism was asserting itself as he reassessed the situation. You told me everything was above board, Blackwood. You assured me that all the proper permits were in place for those shipments. They were, Victor protested, his confident demeanor crumbling slightly under scrutiny, just because some self-appointed forest guardian and his pet wolves claim otherwise. It's not just claims, Sarah interrupted, displaying her tablet again. The screen showed a complex overlay of GPS coordinates, property boundaries, and satellite imagery. The GPS coordinates in Joseph's documentation match exactly with the areas your company has been harvesting illegally, and the plant specimens match those being transported on Clearwater trains. Stanley's expression hardened as he examined the evidence. If Clearwater has been unwittingly involved in illegal activities because of false assurances from Northwest Timber, that changes things considerably. Victor glared at Stanley, his mask of respectability slipping. Don't pretend you didn't know. What was happening? The profit margins on those shipments were too good to question too closely. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Reynolds said, his voice taking on an edge of authority. One that I'm sure the EPA investigators will be very interested in exploring. The tension was interrupted by a soft whine. The wolf pups, curious and growing bolder, had emerged from their hiding place in the tunnel. They approached cautiously, staying close to the alpha female, but clearly intrigued by the humans. Their fur was thick against the cold, their movements still carrying the awkward energy of youth. One small grey pup, braver than the others, trotted directly to Ethan and sat at his feet, looking up with trusting eyes. The moment created a palpable shift in the atmosphere, a reminder of what was truly at stake. Well, I'll be damned, Mason murmured, watching the interaction with evident wonder. They really do trust you. Joseph smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. They recognize those who respect the balance, who understand what's truly important. Ethan knelt down, allowing the pup to sniff his hand, but not attempting to touch it. The moment was profound, a bridge between worlds that few humans ever experienced. The pup's eyes, bright with intelligence, seemed to look straight into his soul. Stanley watched this interaction with visible conflict on his face. The businessman in him wanted to dismiss it all as irrelevant sentimentality, but something deeper was clearly affecting him. His posture softened almost imperceptibly. My grandfather was a forest ranger, he said suddenly, his voice softer than before. The admission seemed to surprise even him. He used to tell me stories about the old ways, about how the land and the animals and the people were all connected. I thought they were just stories. Sarah approached him carefully, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Mr. Walker, Clearwater Railway could play a vital role in protecting this ecosystem. Instead of being part of the problem, you could be part of an innovative solution. What kind of solution? Stanley asked, his resistance beginning to crumble. The corporate mask had slipped, revealing a man capable of considering more than just quarterly profits. A partnership, Dr. Reynolds suggested, stepping forward with renewed energy. The Rain Cloud Sanctuary could become an official research site with sustainable harvesting protocols developed in conjunction with the EPA and the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. Clearwater could have exclusive transport rights for the legally harvested medicinal plants, creating a model of environmental stewardship that would be good for business and good for your corporate image. Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. The pharmaceutical applications alone could revolutionize several treatment fields. Properly managed, sustainable harvesting could yield compounds worth billions while preserving the ecosystem. The idea hung in the air, its potential almost tangible. Stanley looked from the wolves to Joseph to the damaged cargo box with its precious contents, then back to his security team who waited for his decision. It would require significant changes to our operations, he said, slowly weighing each word. Board approval, new protocols. But imagine the publicity, Sarah added, her voice passionate. The first railway to pioneer a truly sustainable partnership with indigenous knowledge and cutting-edge environmental science. The patents alone, from the medicinal applications, could be worth billions. Jake, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Sir, having seen what's at stake here firsthand, I can tell you this isn't just about money or PR. There's something special happening in this forest, something worth protecting. Ethan rose from his crouched position, the wolf pup still sitting contentedly at his feet. Sir, when I threw that key into the snow, I knew I was probably ending my career, but I did it because some things are more important than keeping your head down and following orders. This, he gestured to the wolves, the plants, the entire ecosystem around them. This is worth protecting. Stanley was silent. For a long moment, the internal struggle evident on his face. The businessman and the human being were at war, calculations of profit and loss battling with deeper values that had long been suppressed. Finally, he turned to his security team. Stand down. We're going to cooperate fully with the EPA investigation. Relief washed over the group. Victor cursed under his breath, but no one paid him any attention. The wildlife team secured him more firmly, preparing to transport him back to civilization to face the consequences of his actions. What happens now? Ethan asked, looking from Stanley to Sarah to Dr. Reynolds. Now we formalize the protection of this area, Sarah replied, her fingers already moving across her tablet. Joseph's documentation will be crucial to establishing the boundaries of the sanctuary. Joseph nodded, his eyes reflecting decades of knowledge. I've mapped every inch of these lands over the years. I know where every significant plant grows, where the wolves den, where the other animals seek shelter. And the train? Mason inquired, looking at Stanley. It stays put until the EPA gives clearance, Stanley decided, a new resolve in his voice. We'll send another engine to retrieve the non-controversial cargo. This one can wait for proper procedures to be established for the medicinal plants. Dr. Reynolds extended his hand to Stanley. I think this is the beginning of a very productive partnership, Mr. Walker. Stanley hesitated only briefly before shaking it. My board won't be happy about the delays. Oh, they'll be happy about the exclusive contract for transporting legally harvested medicinal compounds that could revolutionize multiple treatment fields, Sarah pointed out with a smile. As they discussed the logistics, the sky began to clear. The threatening snowstorm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline landscape bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. The wolves, sensing the shift in human emotions, relaxed their vigilant posture. The alpha female approached Ethan once more, this time close enough for him to feel her breath. Joseph watched with a smile. She's thanking you, he said softly, in her own way. I didn't do much, Ethan replied, still somewhat overwhelmed by the connection he felt with the wild animal. I just couldn't stand by and let them be harmed. That's more than most would do, Joseph told him, placing a weathered hand on Ethan's shoulder. It takes courage to stand against the current, to protect what seems unimportant to others. The alpha female looked between the two men, then turned and trotted back to her pack. The pups followed, glancing back occasionally as if reluctant to leave their new human allies. We should establish a base camp, Dr. Reynolds announced, bringing the focus back to practical matters. Dr. Chen, coordinate with the wildlife team on setting up the monitoring equipment. Sarah, can you work with Joseph to document the plant species and their locations? As the teams dispersed to their tasks, Ethan found himself standing alone with Stanley, the two men watching the activity around them. You know, Stanley said after a long moment, my grandfather would have liked this place. Ethan nodded. Mine too. I'll have to explain this to the board, Stanley mused, his business mind already formulating strategies. Frame it as an opportunity rather than a setback. It is an opportunity, Ethan pointed out, to do something that matters. Stanley looked at him with new respect. You really believe that, don't you? I do, Ethan confirmed without hesitation. And I think deep down, so do you. A ghost of a smile crossed Stanley's face. Perhaps, but don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain. The following days saw a flurry of activity as the Raincloud Sanctuary began to take shape. The wildlife team established monitoring stations throughout the area, tracking the wolves and other animals. Sarah and Joseph worked tirelessly to document the medicinal plants, creating a comprehensive map of the ecosystem. Ethan coordinated with Clearwater to arrange for the proper transportation of the samples, ensuring that all protocols were followed. The story of the wolves and the train had captured public attention, with news crews arriving to document the unique partnership that was forming. Images of Joseph with the wolves, of Ethan kneeling beside the curious pup, of scientists working alongside railway personnel, all became symbols of a new approach to conservation. 6 months later, Ethan stood on a newly constructed observation platform overlooking what was now officially designated as the Raincloud Sanctuary. The transformation had been remarkable. Instead of being fired as he had expected, Stanley had surprised everyone by promoting Ethan to a new position, Director of Environmental Partnerships for Clearwater Railway. The sanctuary had flourished under the joint protection of the EPA, the Wildlife Conservation Center, and Clearwater's newly established Environmental Division. Joseph's sustainable harvesting methods had been formalized into protocols that were already being studied by universities across the country. The medicinal plants were thriving, carefully monitored and protected. Northwest Timber had faced significant legal consequences for their illegal operations, with Victor Blackwood personally facing charges for environmental crimes. The company itself was undergoing a complete restructuring under new management committed to sustainable forestry practices. Quite a view, isn't it? Sarah's voice came from behind him. She had been appointed the lead scientist for the sanctuary project, dividing her time between field work and her academic position. Ethan turned with a smile. Over the past months, their professional partnership had evolved into something deeper, a connection forged in the crucible of that fateful day with the wolves. Better than I ever imagined. How's the research going? Breakthrough after breakthrough, she replied, joining him at the railing. Her red hair caught the sunlight as she gazed out over the sanctuary. The compounds we've isolated from the plants show unprecedented efficacy in treating several autoimmune conditions. Clinical trials are already being planned. And Joseph? Sarah laughed, the sound carrying on the clear air. Still refusing to move into the fancy modern cabin we built him. Says his old place suits him just fine. Her expression softened. But he's been an incredible teacher. The traditional knowledge he's sharing is revolutionizing our understanding of this ecosystem. Ethan nodded, looking out over the sanctuary again. And the wolves? Thriving. The pups are almost full-grown now. The pack has even expanded its territory now that they don't have to fear human encroachment. A movement at the tree line caught their attention. The alpha female, her silver coat gleaming in the sunlight, stood watching them. Beside her was the grey pup, now a young adult wolf, that had approached Ethan that fateful day. "She still remembers you," Sarah said softly, leaning against him. "Joseph says she asks about you in her own way when you're not here." Ethan smiled. "I find that easier to believe now than I would have 6 months ago." The transformation hadn't just been in the sanctuary. Clearwater Railway had embraced its new environmental direction wholeheartedly, with Stanley becoming an unexpected champion for corporate responsibility. The company's sustainable shipping initiative had garnered national attention and was being adopted by other transportation businesses. Mason had taken over security for the sanctuary, trading his corporate uniform for the more relaxed attire of a conservation officer. Jake had joined him, the two men finding more satisfaction in protecting the wilderness than in enforcing corporate policies. "Stanley's coming up next week for the official partnership signing," Sarah mentioned, her fingers intertwining with Ethan's. "The governor will be here too. It's becoming quite the model program." "Who would have thought?" Ethan mused, marveling at how much had changed in half a year. One pack of wolves, one damaged cargo box, one moment of decision. One person willing to stand up for what's right, Sarah finished, squeezing his hand. As the sun began to set, painting the sanctuary in hues of gold and amber, the alpha female raised her head and howled, a sound that was no longer mournful, but triumphant. One by one, the other wolves joined in, their voices rising in harmony with the wilderness around them. Ethan and Sarah stood in reverent silence, witnesses to the ancient covenant between the land and its guardians, now renewed for a new generation. The bond that had been forged that snowy day 6 months ago had not only saved a pack of wolves and a precious ecosystem, it had reminded humans of their own place in the natural order, not as conquerors, but as stewards. In the growing twilight, the alpha female and her companion melted back into the forest, disappearing among the trees. But the connection remained, a silent understanding that transcended words, a promise kept between species that shared a common home. "They'll be back," Sarah said with certainty. Ethan nodded, his heart full. "And we'll be here." Dear listeners, we hope the story of Ethan and the Raincloud Sanctuary has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about humanity's connection to the natural world. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this tale of courage and environmental stewardship, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and our relationship with the world around us. What moment in Ethan's journey resonated with you the most? What would you have done in his place? We look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments section below.